Now here I am walking back with my rank on, my wings. I'm an American flyer. I'm a soldier. Now here, I have to be embarrassed this way because here I am with a bunch of German prisoners who we're fighting against, and they're more protected than I was.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tonight, we are dedicating this program to all the men and women who have served in our military. We recently celebrated Veterans Day, and this show tonight is dedicated to the veterans who are alive as well as the millions who have died in the defense of this nation. Tonight's program is titled The Significant Role That Blacks Have Played in Defense of the Red, White, and Blue. Tonight I have with me two African American veterans. Sitting immediately to my right is Randolph Robinson. Randolph, welcome to Captions.
Thank you, Andre.
And sitting immediately to his right is James DeLoth. James, welcome to Captions.
Thank you, Andre. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, it's my pleasure that the two of you are here, and in a sense, you symbolize and are representing millions of Black Americans who have given your lives in the military, not physically, but in your case, James, you came pretty close of making the ultimate sacrifice, and I want to thank you in behalf of this nation for the sacrifices the two of you made in the defense of this nation.
Thank you, Andre. It was my pleasure and my honor to serve. And as a young lad, I wanted a military career. I was inspired by the great leaders that had gone on before. And I think it was in the high school class, they showed a movie of Audie Murphy. I think the name of the movie was To Hell and Back. And from that moment on, I wanted to pursue a military career. And it was rewarding, it was dangerous, and I'm very fortunate to be here.
Yes. In fact, Jim, part of what spurred me to have this show was an excellent article that appeared in the Peoria Journal-Star right around Veterans Day that had your picture and told your story in terms of the service as well as some of the issues that you dealt with growing up in Virginia in what I believe was a segregated school.
That's correct.
And serving in an army that also was probably segregated. And I decided that it was a good chance to tell the story because there are many people in the Black community as well as in the white community that are not aware of the history of Blacks in the military in this nation. In fact, going way back in 1770 when there was a Black man by the name of Crispus Attucks who died in the Boston Massacre, which led to the American Revolutionary War, and all the way to this evening as we're sitting here of Black men and women who are serving in Iraq. And I felt that it would be a good chance for you as well as Randolph Robinson to share with our audience tonight some of the experiences that they had, both positive as well as negative, perhaps while serving in the service, and how you were treated once you came out of the service as well as today. Randolph, let me start with you.
Sure.
How long have you been here in the Peoria area?
Well, since 1985. I retired from Chicago in 83. I moved here in 85.
And what branch of the service did you serve in?
I was in the Air Force.
In the Air Force.
Right, World War II.
In World War II.
Correct.
And that was back during the days of the Tuskegee Airmen, and it's my understanding that even though you weren't necessarily a Tuskegee Airman, you were part of the group, or at least was recognized in terms of some of the training and things that you went through during that time. Can you share, first of all, who were the Tuskegee Airmen for people who may not recognize who they were?
Well, I think it was in 1996. I don't know which organization it was, but they declared that the 57,000 men that participated in the program would be referred to as Tuskegee Airmen.
Okay.
I see it a bit different. I think the fighter pilots who actually flew during the war and established such a great record were actually the real Tuskegee Airmen. My claim as a Tuskegee Airman is simply because we were awarded that privilege along with the rest of the groups. There were two groups, the fighter group and the bomber group. I was in the bomber group.
Okay.
And the bomber group never left the United States.
Okay. But for those that were in the fighter group, from what I understand, there were literally thousands of sorties that were flown by this group of men and shot down some 400 or 500 enemy airplanes while they were doing that. They also escorted the big bombers and were known as a group that never lost a bomber. Am I correct in that information?
That's correct, but I don't remember how many actual kills that they had. I don't know whether it was 500 or the exact number, but that basically was the situation. Why were they so good? Because they were trained a lot longer than anybody else in the Air Force because they didn't want them to fly in the first place.
Okay.
So they were exceptionally good as well as the bomber group. We were training for years instead of 6 or 7 months. I believe it was possible we could have flew the planes backwards. However, the bomber group, as I said, never left the States. They were prepared to, but the war was ended when they were embarking to go to Japan. The war ended, which was, in fact, I wasn't in the group at that particular time. At the time the war ended, I had been sent from the group. I missed my spot, and I was replaced by another radio operator. I was a radio operator gunner in the 616th Bomber Squadron. I missed my spot by being on furlough. They replaced me. When I returned, they sent me to another outfit that I went overseas with. I ended up on Guam, where actually we went there prepared as fighters, but the fighting had all been done on Guam. We were just there because, well, let me straighten this out a bit. The boat first stopped at Iwo Jima. Let me get this straight now. It was either Iwo Jima or Okinawa, I don't recall, but they were fighting there.
Right.
When the boat pulled in, it was a huge boat carrying possibly 3,000 to 4,000 troops and supplies. When it pulled into the bay, it struck ground, and the whole boat rattled. And then the engines roared terrifically, and the boat slowly began to back out. We were going to land on that island where they were fighting, but instead we backed out, and I don't even remember when the boat turned around, but 3 or 4 days later we ended up on Guam. Guam had been secured. We stayed on Guam for several months. We left Guam, went to Tinian. We stayed on Tinian for a few months. Now here's a good thing that I have to say about myself personally. To me, previous to being on the island, I'll go back to the group in a few minutes, but previous to being on the island at Tinian, well, let me put it this way. On the island of Tinian, I was there when the Loyola Gate took off to drop the atomic bomb at the end of the war. I was sitting right there looking at the planes take off. I saw them when they come back in the evening. Now, it wasn't my job to do that. I didn't have a job. We didn't have anything to do as radio operators. So we were told, keep busy and stay out of trouble. And I had a half-track for my personal use. I drove my half-track all around everywhere and had nothing to do but sit down and paint pictures. Now, that's what I said, the good part of this thing. Because to me, the government sent me on a nice, fancy vacation. That's about all I did in the war. I did go into the jungle. I saw two guys bailing out of planes. I went into the jungle, found the two guys, and brought them back to the base. That's my military heroic act, mine personally, which I thought nothing of at the time.
Okay.
Okay, now I'm going to go back to the bomber group as a flyer, as a part of the United States Air Force, as a member of a very special group, the only black bomber group ever in the United States Air Force. Nobody wanted to see black people fly back in 1943 and 44. We trained flying. We were based in Godman Field, Kentucky. We could be flying, and there would be people down on the ground with little pop guns shooting at us, like 22 rifles. They didn't want us there. I could try to go out of camp on the weekend to go somewhere, and some MP who would see me with wings on would try to arrest me because I'm impersonating a flyer. He didn't have no idea that we were the flyers. I remember on another occasion where I was coming back home to the base from Chicago where I lived. I had taken a furlough. I was on this particular train. This train, I didn't know it when I got on the train, but it had 2 carloads of German prisoners on it. I was surprised to see German prisoners in America. But when we got to a certain spot out of Illinois, I think it might have been in Kentucky or Tennessee, they told me that I had to go to the back of the train. So I was in the front in the beginning. So as I passed through these several cars before I got to the cars where the German prisoners were, I saw these American troops with guns there, but they wasn't holding guns. They were standing somewhere by the rail. They were all talking and cajoling with the prisoners. The prisoners were eating and drinking coffee and fine food and stuff. Everybody was having a good time. And when I walked through, the guards say, "Go on, get out of here, get to the back of the train." Now here I am walking back with my rank on, my wings. I'm an American flyer. I'm a soldier. Now here, I have to be embarrassed this way because here I am with a bunch of German prisoners who we're fighting against, and they're more protected than I was.
Treated better than you were.
Get to the back of the train. You have to sit in the Jim Crow car where black people sit. Now that really upset me.
I can understand why. I can understand why.
That was one thing. One of the things that I will never forget. You know, there were others, but I will hesitate and let's just talk to a while with him. While I think of some of the other horrible things that happened while I was during my time in the service. Now I don't like to be a negative person. I'm very positive about everything.
Right.
I'm not a loser. I like to win. That's why when I was a kid, I wanted to fly. And to be a flyer came unexpectedly. I had no idea I would end up in that position in the Air Force. But to me, it was the greatest thing that could have happened to me. But on the other hand, it wasn't the best thing that I didn't prefer the way it was performed. Now let's just talk to.
Well, I know at one time the Army Air Force, I think is what they called it. It was kind of like a division of the Army.
It was the Army?
It was segregated that blacks could not join that or the Navy for a while. That basically the Army was about the only branch of the military that blacks were at least allowed to be a part of, although they were put in segregated units and they were probably treated as second-class soldiers in terms of during their stint in the service.